In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration, it actually probably wasn't, and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. We begin our Advent journey toward Bethlehem and the manger with a decree from Rome. Now think about it. You can actually, on the internet, find an interactive map that will tell you how long it took to get from Rome to Judea in the ancient world. I didn't look it up, but it's a long time. So we know that this decree went out months and months and months before our story even starts. And on this first Sunday of Advent, we ask ourselves whether we are placing our hope in the empires of the world, or we are placing our hope in the liberating through line of God's presence throughout the story of God's people. What are we longing for this Advent? And how does it call us to act with hope? So how far is Bethlehem from Rome? Well, as far as no power is from power. The gap between the power of Rome and the no power of the Bethlehemites is just an immense chasm. Rome was the place of power that determined the lives and fates of those living in Bethlehem. Rome shaped the culture. Rome shaped the laws, even the beliefs of people of other nations, races, and religions. Rome was one of those kind of places that could be referred to as if it was a person. You know, if Rome chooses to do this, if Rome doesn't get its act together, Rome must act now, kind of the way we say Washington, with about as much enthusiasm and as much hope for a good outcome. So let me make a couple of observations about Rome so we know what kind of journey we're on here. First of all, Rome had the power to do good things. Rome created aqueducts and sewer systems so disease and sickness were reduced in Rome. The Roman Empire was known for its advanced highways that moved not only military, but commerce, which had the ability to bring prosperity, robust global prosperity, the center of which was, well, not Bethlehem. Rome ruled through client kings. They had a really good system that worked for Rome. All you had to do to be a local client king was vow allegiance to Rome, and then you were free to do pretty much whatever you want, which involved applying your own taxes so you too could have wealth. Which brings us to Herod, a byword for evil of all kinds. Herod would stop at nothing to retain power. He was famous all over the Roman Empire. That may have been a backwoods, but he was known even in the heart of Rome for his ruthlessness. He murdered his mother-in-law, he murdered his wife, he murdered 3 of his sons just because he thought they were undermining them. Caesar once quipped, because Herod was nominally Jewish, that's how he got the gig. Caesar once said, well, it's safer to be one of Herod's pigs than one of Herod's family. Is it any wonder we never see any little Herods in our nativities? And in the meantime, Rome, of course, turned a blind eye to Herod's evil for all the reasons you would guess. If he could keep the peace, he could keep the money. Well, some of it anyway. And in every way you can think of, Rome had the power and the Bethlehemites did not. The Bethlehemites lived under a ruling force, an occupying force, that was beyond their control. It didn't just seem to be beyond their control, it was. In any worldly sense, in any physical sense, they were powerless. And yet, they still were filled with longing, still filled with longing for freedom, for justice, for peace. But changing things felt impossible because if Rome got wind of trouble, they would put that down. In fact, by 70 AD, some 40 years after Jesus, they were so fed up with Judean insurrections that they just leveled Rome. You know why they can't build any of those old buildings again? Because the Romans took all the stones and built other stuff, other places. All they could do in Bethlehem and throughout Judea was long for, hope for something different to happen. As we are traveling toward Bethlehem, what is our Rome? And what is the journey that we take that ends with the birth of this baby that promises freedom, justice, and peace, hope, love, and joy? Paul writes this to the Romans. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. Not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have been the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. What has happened in your life since this time last year? Maybe you had some celebrations that brought some joy to your life this year. Maybe you have some empty places that showed up this year. Maybe both of those things. What is Rome for us today? What is Rome for you today? What feels overpowering, insurmountable, hopeless? Sometimes we are just pawns in someone else's game. Sometimes that's true. But we are not completely helpless. What is the power that God gives us in those kinds of situations? How does God give you the ability to continue to hope? This time last year, late in December, I was sick with something that was the aftermath of COVID that I'd had in October. I got COVID on that trip that 16 of our church members took together to see the Holy Land. And we were steaming our way that first day toward Jerusalem when the ship stopped dead in the water. It was October 7th. And we learned Israel had been attacked. That was the day. So the trip got changed completely, and there wasn't anything we could do about that. And of course, life changed even more for people in that part of the world, and the violence has gotten worse by the day. What is it like to live with that reality? That you are someplace you can't get out of and you can't get away from. You can't just move to another country or move to another house or leave the relationship. What if this year, in a personal way, you are fighting some kind of uphill battle? Maybe one nobody else even knows about. How do we come to terms with the harshness that is the reality of our nativity story? Because this is the story of humanity over time. Human frailty, human cruelty, and human compassion. That is our story. And by grabbing onto that, Christmas has real power. It only has real power if it has the power to give us hope when there's no hope, and courage when we are afraid, and tenacity when we want to give up, and resilience when we are crushed. Christmas is a powerful, powerful story, but only if we look beyond what is sweet and what is sparkly. I'm all for sweet and sparkly. I think sparkly helps us remember that there's light. Paul says the whole creation groans with longing. Can you just feel that in your body? The things you hope for, the things you pray for over and over and over with no sign of them getting better, but you keep praying anyway. That's the mood of Advent. That's what deep underneath the holiday out there is, the Christian conscience of what is happening as we launch into the beginning of the Christian year. We live between the what is real and what could be, what is happening and what we hope for. The journey toward Christmas begins in longings, in hope. But not little longings, not like New Year's resolutions. I long to lose 10 pounds. I long to save more money. I long to get more exercise. Maybe I could, dear God, help me be nice to the guy at the grocery store. What are the deepest longings of your heart? Not your Christmas wishes, but the deepest, deepest longings of your heart. I invite you to make that your Advent meditation this week. Maybe what calls to you is gun violence, because 118 people are killed by gun violence every day in the U.S., a statistic that is unmatched by any other first world country. Perhaps you're troubled because more than 50,000 Americans died of suicide in 2023, a historical high for us. Maybe you're worried about education equity, or safe and affordable housing, or climate change. Whatever comes to you as you think about the deep longings you have, the groaning for creation, for our common good, for all of creation, you may feel overwhelmed by it. What is your ability to change? Keep listening, because God shows us the way, step by step, little step by little step. That's why we here are a Changemaker Church. That's why here our path of discipleship is to become compassionate changemakers in the way of Jesus. We might never have heard of Martin Luther King Jr. if it hadn't been for Rosa Parks, who courageously refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. But you wouldn't have heard of Rosa Parks if you hadn't heard of Claudette Colvin, if it hadn't been for Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old, and she was in Rosa Parks' church youth group. And about 1 month, almost exactly 1 month before Rosa Parks' noteworthy actions became a part of history, Claudette Colvin had already done the same thing. She had refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. She had a different outcome. The bus driver pulled the bus over, stopped it, called the police, they dragged her off and put her in jail. Later, she said, "I was worried, but I was proud. I had stood up for our rights. I had done something my adults hadn't done." And her pastor came to pick her up and take her home, or so the story goes. And on the way, he said, "Claudette, I'm so proud of you. Everyone prays for freedom. We've been praying and praying, but you're different. You want your answer the next morning. And I think you just brought revolution to Montgomery." Rosa Parks said it was Claudette Colvin that inspired her. And Martin Luther King Jr. said it was Rosa Parks that inspired him. You could say the civil rights movement about which we know so much began with the courageous resistance of a girl whose name you probably didn't hear until today. Courage is born of hope. Courage is born of longing. And that's what Advent is, great longing for the whole world. And as long as you're still longing, as long as you're still hoping, that is, in and of itself, an act of courage. Hope and courage are inseparable. I love this canopy of lights. I want to thank the team that did this. We did it last year, and it's just so spectacular and so moving to me that I asked if we could have it again. And I think we know that, especially in the daytime, one of these little lights would probably not even be noticeable. It's possible that if it was nighttime and none of the other lights were on, that one of these little lights might cast a bit of light. But taken together, when all our lights are gathered together, we can dispel a good bit of darkness. You're not by yourself. You don't dispel the great darkness all by yourself. We do it when we are strung together as a community, when we are held together by our hope, our willingness, our stories, and our faith. When we come together, we can make enough light to push back the darkness. Keep listening, keep longing, keep hoping, take courage, and welcome to the journey. See you next week in Jerusalem.